is what do you think governments can do to either stay away from or do away with nuclear weapons?
Well, I think probably there are three things that governments can do. The first is to insist on the full mandate of the non-proliferation treaty. That is to say, that governments have an obligation not to expand nuclear weapons to states that don't possess them, but that governments also have an obligation to reduce and eliminate their own stockpiles, and that both of those mandates have to be kept together, and people need to advocate to governments so that they are kept together. The other thing probably that needs to be done is some attention to weaponry in space, because the nuclear weapons tend to, since they're not used very often, thankfully, they tend to be in search of modernization and expansion to new fields of interest. And one of those fields at the moment is outer space. While there are no weapons in outer space at the moment, many defense establishments are developing contingencies for putting weapons in space, and that not all of those contingencies involve defensive weapons. Some of them involve offensive weapons, and there isn't any real reason to believe at this point that some of those wouldn't be also nuclear capable weapons. And the third thing I think is to get governments to understand the inextricable relationships between weaponry of all kinds. That conventional weapons and small arms, which are the weapons that kill most people, create security concerns that drive some other nations to acquire larger and larger weapons, both the huge conventional weapons now being developed, but also the nuclear weapons that are kind of a trump card against attack by conventional weapons. And so I think all of those, the sort of holding nuclear weapons within a context of weapons elimination in general, holding governments to both sides of the non-proliferation treaty. I mean, I think that's absolutely indispensable. And also looking at...
It's a political challenge, isn't it, though? And I think if we look at the 5 Security Council members, I mean, how realistically do you think that you can change that sort of political dynamic where each of the 5 security members is very unwilling to hold themselves accountable to the same standards they set for other countries? That's
very true. And there's untold hypocrisy amongst the P5 countries, in the U.S. being the breathtaking leader in the hypocrisy movement. But it's also true that the countries are still capable of being shamed, and that in many cases the public has been sold on the notion that the non-proliferation treaty is about proliferation and not about reduction. And so it's, as the 2010 PrepCom comes up, one of the things that probably needs to happen, and I think some people are looking at, is to change the name of the treaty so that it notes up front that this is a dual obligation, not a single obligation.